driving, Gordon.
Hey there, this is Mr. Icarus, and welcome to yet another edition of Doom. Wait, no, this is definitely not Doom. I keep making that goddamn mistake. This is Half-Life 2 by way of Gary's mod, featuring a wonderful gameplay mod by the name of Temporal Assassin. What exactly does Temporal Assassin enable you to do? Well, you're looking at it. You have the ability to slow down time, blast your enemies into smithereens, and in some cases even go full, allowing you to stop time outright, make a few decisive trigger pulls before standing back to admire your handiwork. All of this, of course, is at the cost of temporal mana. Naturally, mana will drain at a much faster rate if you're using time stop as opposed to simply slowing down time, but there is a way to recoup it, and one that factors nicely into the flow of combat. You're able to employ a temporal guard, one that drains your stamina in exchange for reduced damage from hits. This in turn fuels a much increased mana regen, allowing you to re-employ those abilities and wreak slow-mo havoc all over again. Let's face it though, all of the temporal mechanics in the world wouldn't mean jack shit if you didn't have something cool to do in the midst of it. And that is where the wonderful weapon roster of Temporal Assassin comes to the forefront, because good grief, this arsenal is wonderfully satisfying to wield. For starters, you've got the arc blade for your hacking, slashing, bullet deflecting needs, not to mention an ult that'll charge the edge to make it even more lethal. The starting pistol is interesting. It'll come in multiple flavors depending on what map pack you're using, but if I had to pick a favorite, this one, for very obvious reasons. And then there's the Howling Wolf. Oh lord, this is featured heavily in my footage for good reason. Not only is it my head splitter in chief, but it also features an alt fire function that allows you to straight up style on your enemies before you pop one in the noggin. But wait, there's more. Dodging bullets while using the alt fire will actually fill a gauge. And when it's full, well, heavens, would you just look at the time. Rounding out the handgun category, and feeling more like a piece of artillery than anything else, we have the Magnum. Yep, that one, from the Halos. Only here, anything unfortunate enough to be caught in its crosshairs pretty much gets erased from the fabric of reality. Oh boy, shotguns. If you like them, this mod has got you covered. As you might imagine, the Snake Charmer is one heck of a double-barrel sawn-off. Its primary operates in an interesting fashion. You might be assuming that a single trigger pull will get you the double-barrel blaster, but if you hold down the trigger, you get one barrel, and when you release the trigger, you get the other. This allows you to be a little bit more economical with your face ruining, considering one barrel is usually more than enough to do the job, and you can then maneuver into a more favorable position where you can then unleash the other. As for the ult, it unleashes both barrels at the same time, but requires some charge-up time. Why? Because, believe it or not, the alt fire mode features unlimited penetration. The Cruentus, am I saying that right? In any case, this is probably the most mechanically complex weapon for me to use in Temporal Assassin, and that is by virtue of the fact that I am universally rubbish at remembering to reload, so this kind of doubles down on that fatal flaw. For reference, you must manually pump before every shot. You can pump twice to rack 2 rounds into the chamber, and when the magazine runs dry, because yes, this shotgun utilizes a mag, of course, you'll have to hit the reload key in order to replace it. Pumping and reloading, separate keys. You don't have to enable the manual pumping, but it is enabled by default, and when that's the case, I usually feel compelled to put in the effort to figure such mechanics out, even if it takes an embarrassingly long time to get my brain cells to cooperate. But believe me, it is well worth the effort. Nailing that rhythm, making sure you pump those rounds before you just obliterate a head, it is supremely satisfying. And just to cap it all off, this weapon also features an alt fire, which allows you to focus shots down for much reduced spread. And then there's the Fool's Oath. Holy shit! Next up, we've got, you know what? It's good. It's real good. You want a gun that's gonna punch holes? This'll punch holes. If you want to punch more holes, its alt fire lets you punch 3. Job's a good one. Longhorn is a nice beefy sounding semi-auto rifle. It's got 2 modes, one for short to mid-range, and the other for going long. But if I'm not mistaken, blue mode ain't so great for body shots, but if you're aiming for the head, it does in fact grant bonus damage. What can I say? It's called the Harbinger, and it is perfect in every conceivable way. Haha, time for explosives. Quite like the Kingslayer, obliterates on hit, bounces around if you miss, and that ult. Oh boy, that ult. All I'll say is, certainly not a weapon for confined spaces, and yes, how perceptive of you. That is the same model as the grenade launcher from Reach. If you enjoy the prospect of sticking enemies with explosive tipped crossbow bolts, then Queen's Doom is the weapon for you. If you're feeling particularly sadistic, you can stack the bolts as heavily as you like before hitting that ult button to give yourself a big bada boom. After all that, I'd say that the Frontliner is probably the most conventional weapon in the big splodey category. It's a rocket launcher that can fire up to 3 rockets continuously, but that's about it. Looks cool in slow-mo, but I was hoping for an ult where you could maybe stack all 3 simultaneously. Then again, if you play your time stop correctly. And now, the exotics. You might recognize this from High Noon Drifter. Even features the same ult. Best watch the mana drain though, it goes quick. I don't know much about the Whisper, other than the fact that it appears to be a celestial sniper rifle powered by pure fuck helium. Keeping the Whisper scoped in will eventually allow you to deliver a charged shot, one that I believe delivers a bit more explosive force. And if you feel like your aim is a little unsteady, well, believe it or not, this thing can punch clean through a time stop. In fact, I'm pretty sure this thing can punch through anything. Except Barney. Nobody punches through Barney.
Barney is eternal.
Well, you know what they say, if you want a job doing right, you're just gonna have to summon an abomination from the temporal abyss. That one makes everyone's heads explode.
Except for Barney.
Pesky hunter getting you down? Devour it with a time snake. Now available in a stylish scarf. Mercifully, for the sake of balance, or something at least resembling it, you can't just readily call on monsters from beyond the perceivable veil of time and space at a moment's notice. Firstly, you've got to acquire the ability to summon them, and then when you do, it's going to cost a significant chunk of that temporal mana. Not to mention the cooldown that you'll incur before you can use it again. But that idea of managing your cooldowns, waiting for a recharge, building meter, or even anticipating the potential reload time of any given weapon here is something that is fairly ingrained in the DNA of Temporal Assassin's gameplay. The kind of thing that mercifully prevents it from just becoming some kind of outright inconsequential power fantasy. There's without a doubt an element of mastery to the proceedings here, the sense that the more familiarity you develop with the gameplay mechanics of Temporal Assassin, the more enjoyment you'll be able to squeeze out of it. It's not just simply slow-mo, there's shotgun jumping, there's atomic drop kicks to the face, there's the combination of movement and dash charges to have bullets narrowly skim by. These and more are elements that, when you truly get into the swing of utilizing them properly, make this mod absolutely sing. It is a tremendous joy to play, so much so that I just wanted to keep gathering footage. I didn't really want to stop. I kept downloading map packs, I kept testing it with them. I just wanted to keep going. And on that front, Temporal Assassin itself actually draws from a curated list of maps that have been tweaked specifically to work a bit better with the gameplay of this particular mod. You'll find that such tweaks will include teleport points that allow you to skip potentially flow-breaking narrative or structural elements of a map. You'll also find that tweaks can also extend to certain enemies within these maps too. Probably one of the most noticeable would be the commander type Combine. These let off a green explosion when killed, and you can sometimes tell whenever one's nearby because any other Combine type enemies can receive an energy shield buff from them, making them occasionally a little difficult to take down. If anything, they add a fascinating wrinkle, especially in the midst of combat, where you're forced to engage in a little bit of target prioritization in order to make your life a bit easier. But if anything, I'd like to see much more of that. Some maps that perhaps front-load with shielded enemies, forcing you to hunt for the commander hidden within. As for which maps tend to gel best with the Temporal Assassin experience, I typically tend to favor maps that are a little bit more open and a little bit more conducive to making good use of those wonderful movement mechanics. Minerva certainly springs to mind. It's got a lot of great locations to experiment in, certainly in regards to the first few portions. And when it comes to other maps that I had quite a lot of fun with, Cosmonaut and Forest Train certainly spring to mind. Personally, I'd love to see a few custom challenge maps designed specifically with Temporal Assassin in mind, and from what I can tell, something to that regard is already in the works, and as you can imagine, I'm eagerly looking forward to giving that a whirl for myself. So yeah, thoroughly endorsing this mod, and quite frankly, it's not the kind of mod that I ever really expected to see in Half-Life 2. It's not the usual type, if that makes any sense. If anything, it feels like a hybridization of the slow-mo elements from Fear, a game that I absolutely frigging adore, and some of the gameplay stylings that I'm more used to back in my usual playground of Doom modding. And the evidence for that is pretty clear, all things considered. There's multiple references to High Noon Drifter throughout Temporal Assassin, and I dare say that Temporal Assassin gets reasonably close to being just as mechanically satisfying movement-wise, weapon-wise, as that aforementioned mod, which, coming from me, is high praise indeed. Oh, and the jibbing! Let's not forget the jibbing. That's pretty nice too. Naturally, it's worth mentioning the beta is beta, and things covered in this here video are subject to change, and even though I've covered an extensive amount of what's in this mod, I have left a few things out, because ideally, I do like people to discover the occasional thing for themselves. As usual, if you find yourself interested, you'll find the link in the description below, and for best results, make sure you pay attention to the README files, doubly so if you're about as familiar with Half-Life 2 and Gmod shenanigans as yours truly. Other than that, hope you've enjoyed this video. Feel free to let me know what you thought in the comments below, and feel free to suggest any interesting mods you'd like to see me take a look at further on down the line. This has been Mr. Icarus. Thank you very much for watching. Icarus out.